We are live and recording. So good afternoon now, everybody. Thank you for joining myself today, Alex Chisnell. Hope you're all doing well. If you've joined us on our previous webinar earlier today, thank you for jumping on here as well. So I'm joined by Geordie Wardman, who is in right down in the southwest of France. Am I right?
That's right. How are you today, Alex?
I'm really good. Yeah,
good.
I mean, it's probably we had a glorious day yesterday, and it's meant to be awesome in the UK from like Friday onwards. But at the moment, it's pretty grey, wet, and miserable. But hey,
Oh, really? But it's on its way out, right? Clearing up, hopefully.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's it like down where you are in France?
It's lovely. Yeah, lovely. But it's sunny, about 25, so perfect.
Beautiful. Okay. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. So we are on the Festival of Enterprise platform today, and we're also going to put this out on the podcast. So my podcast, Screw It, Just Do It. We are celebrating 250 episodes today. We've got an episode with Oliver Cookson, founder of My Protein. So please do dive over and have a listen to that as well. And then we will be putting this live episode out with Geordie out very soon as well over this summer, because he's a podcast host as well. So we've got loads to talk about.
That's right.
And what's the name of your podcast, just to let everybody know whilst they're checking mine out?
The Big Break Software Podcast. It's mostly for people that want to start a software as a service. That's what I mostly focus on. But of course, we dive into lots of other topics having to do with being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, would you call yourself, as well as a podcast, so would you call yourself a serial entrepreneur? Because I believe you have like 5 companies, is that right?
I don't know. I sort of don't like that name, to be honest. I think it sort of takes away from people's accomplishments, and not that someone like maybe like Elon Musk. He seems like a serial entrepreneur, right? He was born.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like being an entrepreneur is what I was meant to do, and I love it. But yes, I have had a number of projects, definitely.
And have you always specialized in SaaS businesses, software as a service businesses?
No, I haven't. That's the thing, is I bounced around. So I started in retail in 2003. I started at a Bermuda shorts company. I'm from Bermuda. I started with a Bermuda shorts company, and I didn't really know that much about business at the time. And I sold that 3 years later. It was a side hustle. So I was working a full-time job as a programmer at an ISP, internet service provider in Bermuda. And so I had somewhat of a technical background. From there, I went into I started a Wi-Fi business, in like putting Wi-Fi into Mexican hotels, which is a bit random. But it brought me over to Mexico, which is, sort of something that where I wanted to go and explore. I was into traveling. My wife really loved it. We went for vacation there and kind of fell in love with it, and stayed there for a few years. I started my first SaaS in 2014. So since then, I've been technical, but I haven't really been in SaaS since 2014.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. One of my best friends, he sold his business for a healthy 8 figures, and he started up, I think they were the first ever app on zero accounting.
Oh, really? Okay.
And before that, he was with Salesforce over in the US, over in Phoenix and stuff. So I know he'll be interested in this episode as well. So I was trying to place your accent and working out where you'd come from, because I know you live in Switzerland at the moment, but you're holidaying in France. But originally
from Bermuda, yeah. So I've got sort of a neutral accent. I mean, it's probably North American, but neutral, I would like to say.
Yeah, for sure. And start off, I suppose, to get a good point to start off would be literally how has lockdown affected you? Because you've, like I say, you managed to get away now for a break. So how have things been in Switzerland, and when have things been kind of relaxed for enable you to start traveling?
Well, so Switzerland, I think, really handled this very well. We were, we're right next to Italy. I'm about 45 minutes from Italy, so we
Oh,
sort of
wow.
were really early on the curve. Is sort of early March, when things were starting to happen in Italy. People, the Italians were. It was in northern Italy, as you likely remember, and the northern Italians have family in southern Switzerland, so they were coming over, and we were all just sort of watching the numbers go from 1 to 2, like everyone else, right?
Mm.
And we noticed the first cases in Switzerland probably about 2 weeks after them, and from there it was like we heard it was like, oh, there was one in the town. A friend went to the doctor, and the next day it was 4.
Wow.
And then the next day it was literally like, okay, they're shutting everything down. It happened that fast. And as if we had it, I had it, my whole family had it. My wife was
Ah,
asymptomatic. For me, it was mild. My son had it for about 35 days. Um,
really?
yeah, so it was
Huh.
various stages. But
Mm.
literally in the town where I'm from, I don't know anyone that didn't have it. It just blew through this so quickly. Um, and so now Switzerland is, I think I saw something. It's the safest country in the world for it. They've been open, uh, I think we've been open now for about a month. And you wouldn't even know, like it's, people are walking around. There's no masks or anything.
Is there
So,
not? No,
no
okay,
masks
interesting.
really.
Yeah.
You might, if you went into a big mall or something, you might see like maybe like 4% or 5% people wearing masks, but no
Mm.
masks. I don't know, for better or for worse, but
Yeah,
but when
exactly.
the cases are so low, you just feel like it's sort of overkill to wear a
Mm.
mask.
Yeah, no, interesting, because I think we just briefly talking offline before we jumped in here, and I said, my family, we were skiing, snowboarding in a place called Cavallese,
Yeah,
in Italy, and when you're looking at the kind of map afterwards, it
uh,
was literally like,
I'm
again,
sure they had it
probably
there and they didn't know.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah,
and but
exactly.
you didn't get it, eh?
No, but again, it's funny, isn't it? Because when you do have a test, they can't tell you if you have had it. They can just tell you if you've, or in the UK at least, whether you've currently got it. So
Yeah,
I know, number of people who were like, "Oh, that's why I felt like that back at that time."
yeah,
And it was
exactly.
here far earlier than we realised, of course. But and how does it affect you? I mean, with regards to your
The business,
businesses,
yeah.
you've got like you get two businesses. Is that right at the moment?
That's right. So it's really, so what I have is I have an agency that's a software. So to go back a bit, I
Mm,
did have, I was in e-commerce for a while. And I sold that company when I moved from Mexico to Switzerland because it was the time zone stuff was challenging. So I sold that company. So I had like a year or two where I was kind of just like trying to figure out what I was going to do.
mm,
And I was like, wow, software is, at the time, was sort of an eco business. And part of my problem was I didn't really feel that eco-friendly just by producing product, and there was waste from that product. And even though I was creating eco-friendly packaging, it was like, it felt sort of hypocritical. So it just sort of rubbed me the wrong way. So I got out of that business, and it was like, software is the most eco-friendly business you can have, right? There's
mm.
literally no product. You're selling like air. You're selling
Yeah, yeah.
ideas, right? So
Mm,
um, I really liked the idea of creating and helping people through software, and you can make people's businesses better, and you solve problems, which is something that speaks to me. And so I got into software, and I really feel like there's no turning back now. Like, I sort of bounced around. As I mentioned, I was in retail, and then I was in the service industry, and then I was in e-commerce, and now I'm in software, and I really feel like this is where I'm meant to be. Um,
mm.
and so that's where I'm going to stay. So I have a software as a service business that I just bought from my partners. So I'm sort of taking that more seriously. No one had been doing anything with it for years.
Right.
Um, and so I've got that. and we're building another SaaS as well, because I've got a team that's, like 30, 40 people, developers. And so I can take, when there's down times, like, okay, let's dedicate a developer to these software as a service. And so the idea is that we're going to be growing the agency, sort of now, is sort of 80% of our revenues. And we're going to divert some of the funds, cash flow from the agency over to the software as a service.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so the idea is that eventually it'll be 50-50, and sort of growing from there. And that was sort of along that's really the idea of getting into the software is and then the theme that we were mentioning today that I really believe in is that freelance agency to product path, and that's the one I'm following now.
No, I like it. And with regards to say the team that you built, and interested to know, like with the lifestyle that you have and how you operate the business, are they scattered across the world? And
they definitely are. Yeah. So
Okay.
I have my operations guy in Zurich. As you mentioned, I'm from Switzerland, but like I don't see him. He's in Zurich. I'm in Verbier, which is about 4.5 hours away. And then my main team is in India, and they do go into an office, and that actually does seem to help, because there is a manager and he can pull, so it's not just me trying to corral 30 programmers that are sort of all over the world. While we do have contractors, like I have an operations girl that's in British Columbia. I have a support guy that's in the Dominican, and two content writers that are in South Africa. So we are spread out all over the place. But the core, like operations, which is development, is in India. And so my CTO manages them. And I do feel like he has that, like, so that I don't need to worry about it so much. I think it would be quite challenging to run a team that large, although there's plenty of successful software as a service companies that do it, like Basecamp. I know they're big into it.
Yes.
And I spoke to Bonjoro, who's a guy he's actually from London, but he's now living in Australia. Very successful guy who started Bonjoro, which is a software as a service. Yeah, and he's got like a similar size team, and they're all remote, so it can definitely be done.
Interesting. I've had 2 interviews with founders of businesses that I already knew and got them on, one of these live streams during lockdown, and they're both American, but they happened to be in Australia when lockdown happened in different places, and they both decided just to stay there in the end for like the last 4 months, because there's probably not a safer place in the world when you look at like the map.
That's right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I saw this week, like Melbourne's been locked down for like 6 weeks because there's like a spike, and it's like, geez, you can plan all the greatest things in the world, but
yeah, exactly. I wonder, just out of curiosity, how Australia is handling the visa situation, because I don't know what the U.S. visa is like in Australia, but I imagine they just can't stay.
Yeah,
they're like, well, I can't leave. I wonder how they're being with that.
Yeah, someone else I'd had on my Screw It Just Do It podcast before, and she's what you would call a digital nomad, and she had bought 2 ski lodges. She literally lives one door but down from me, and but she set up a YouTube channel, doing incredibly well in just creating courses and selling those courses. She's not even 30, and it enabled her and her partner to travel the world, and they've ended up buying like a couple of ski chalets in Georgia near Russia, and are able to live this lifestyle.
That's
but she
great.
came back here to visit before lockdown happened, and ended up getting caught here, and then getting told you need to leave the country, or otherwise your tax bill is going to be X, Y, and Z. Add a couple of zeros to it type thing. She had all these projects lined up, which including was one with me.
Yeah.
And she's had to go, look, I'm just going to have to, as soon as they say I can go, I've got to go, or otherwise I'm going to get nailed
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
got a question from Carol here, which I will dive into because it is on point rather than dealing with the end. So Geordie, she says, if you were starting a new business today, would you employ staff or just use freelancers or contractors? Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, the answer is actually pretty easy, though. To mitigate your risk, I would start off with a freelancer contractor, and that way you can kind of see how that person works. And sometimes you may end up. I have a very good freelance girl. It's hard to say what she is, but she's kind of does maybe 5 hours, and it's use as you need, which is really mitigates your risk. You don't have to be like, okay, all of a sudden I'm burdened with this, huge cut in my cash flow when I'm just getting going. As a startup, it's cash flow is, you live and die by that. So I would start as a freelancer or contractor, and if you like them, make them an offer and take them on full time when the cash flow is there. And for the most part, that may take you 6 months. Plus, there's no risk to it's just kind of pulling back on their hours, saying, "Listen, I don't really need you this if you don't like working with them." So it's a good sort of trial way to do it.
Yeah, I agree, and I've done both, and I think I remember when I started a business by taking on people full time, and then regretted it only a couple of months into that, instead of gradually ramping things. And you might not even have the amount of work that they could be doing, and you're just kind of paying for them to then do research or general admin kind of jobs.
It's tough, especially when you're a startup and you're just getting going.
Yeah, good question and great answer as well. And interested to know, so Geordie, how is, like, in your businesses, how do you think, like, consumer behavior, have you seen any patterns emerging during lockdown? Have things changed dramatically for you in your businesses during the last, say, 100 days?
So we didn't really touch upon that, but so the one SaaS that I have that I bought for my partners, it's an online reviews platform. So it's like helping small businesses, and I'm focusing on music teachers. So obviously the music teachers can't give lessons, because they can't, they're at home. They're trying to bring their businesses online. They're finding the students just say it doesn't really work when you're doing that online. And I can really understand that if you're going to learn guitar or something, you want your teacher to be like, oh, the way you're holding the guitar or something. You can't really do that on Zoom, or you're hitting the keys too hard on the piano. So that business has been hit pretty hard. Probably lost about 40 to 50% of my revenues in that. So that was a pretty hard hit. Now the agency side has, if anything, has picked up, and that's because obviously we're remote. One of the objections that I might have gotten before COVID was like, no, we hire in-house developers. We want them in the office. Nobody can say that now, So I'm working, that agency side has picked up while the SaaS has sort of fallen off. But it brings up an interesting point. It's really important, I feel, to diversify so that if situations like this do happen, you have something to fall back on. And people say, oh, this is a once in a century type of event, but there's also these events that happen. Let's say you're working in tourism, for example. In Mexico, there was something happens with the cartel, and all of a sudden you're relying on Airbnb income, and something happens in your town, and all of a sudden your revenues dry up, and you're like, you have nothing. So that's why I'm a big believer in having sort of a small basket of income that I can fall back and pivot. And so I've been doing this long enough that probably like yourself, you've seen a few ups and downs in economy. There's 2008, and being able to shift is so important, and quickly, if you want to survive being an entrepreneur, I think.
It is. My wife and I were literally just talking about somebody we knew today as we drove past local shops here, because it was like, we said, oh, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so, you know, incredibly wealthy, do incredibly well, but they literally own hundreds of properties, but they're all holiday lets. And you think they've all been empty for 100 days. And no matter how well you might do in August, maybe a bit of September, in reality, you're heading into the winter in where I live, in Poole and Dorset, a seaside town. And you've missed the major part of the year. So we were just saying, God, if there's any lessons for having, you know, diversifying and not having all your eggs in one basket. And me and myself and Alan Barrett from Grenade, the sports nutrition company, we're chatting. You know, he knows Richard Branson, my old boss, pretty well, and he was saying, you know, wow, I wonder what Richard's thinking now, because, you know, so many of his businesses were literally all parked, you know, in travel. They'd literally just launched a cruise ship business as well. You know,
my God, that's
what does that cost?
One.
The least
that one's going to take a decade to recover from, you know.
I think you're right. I don't think that's a quick recovery. Do you? Who's going to want to?
No. People are going to be scarred from this whole experience. You know, that sort of the ghost cruise ships that nobody were taking. You know, that were sort of bouncing from country to country. And I think I saw something about Virgin Atlantic was filing bankruptcy or something like that. I mean, you know, he's got to be carrying a lot of debt too on these. So. You know, of course, he's a smart guy and he'll survive, but it's just going to be tough.
Yeah, I can see Tom's just posted up a question again, and clearly people interested in how you work and how you manage your team. So Tom said, how did you find the team all over the world? Is it from Upwork, word of mouth? How did you build trust between the teams? So a couple of questions there, but good questions.
Yeah, great questions. So I think Upwork is great for certain things. Like if you wanted to find like small tasks, like if I wanted a content writer or something. But for developers, I don't like Upwork, and I feel pretty strongly about that, which is why I built my own team, and I've been doing this for long enough to know that. And I've tried Upwork, and TopTal is pretty expensive too, but it's really trial and error. So the team that I got was word of mouth, and then trial and error. So I started them on a small task, and I said, you know, whatever I had going at the time, I think it was like, I need my website redone. So can you do that? And, you know, that's pretty low risk. You know, if they get it wrong, you know, it's fine. I can always find someone, but, something that took maybe a month to do. And, you know, are they responsive? How are they at invoice time? Are they being a pain? You know, like, are they bugging me every, you know, 2 hours to pay them? You know, what's that whole relationship like? And that is usually the way. So I've been through probably maybe 20 to 30 teams from all over Argentina, Russia, Belarus, the US, Canada, it doesn't matter. But these guys, and a lot from India that I had bad experiences in, Pakistan and Egypt, and but these guys ended up being really good. And the reason I say good is they were very trusting right from the beginning. They started it. They didn't ask for an upfront payment. And we started to work together, and I just sort of liked them. And over the sort of months, gave them more and more, and then started to add other things. And it's really how I got into the business, is from that team. They became so good, because I didn't actually start off, when I sold my e-commerce business, I didn't start off thinking, hey, I'll just build an agency, because I didn't have anything, right? I just sold my company. I was between sort of jobs, I guess, or projects. And I was looking around for the next product or project. And because these guys were so good, I started to give them more and more work. And one of the problems that I found was people were writing me on LinkedIn and saying, can you help me find software projects? These are software developers from all over the world. They were writing me. And I said, well, this is a problem that is huge, because you can imagine if you're a guy like me that has 30 developers on staff. At the time, I had no one. It was just me. But imagine you're in a position and you've got these guys full time, and you've got you're going along and COVID happens and 3 projects that were employing half your team just say, no, I can't fund this anymore. So these guys need a constant pipeline of leads, right? So I knew it was a big problem. And so I started to look more into the problem, and I realized why it was so hard, because I couldn't even get them. You know, it was like someone with me, I had a lot of lead gen experience, and I was like, these are really hard to get, and I had no background in it, so I had to build that base, build authority in the market, and from there was, you know, when I started to get the software leads, I was realized it's like, well, it's much more valuable for me to own this lead and not give it away. So that's how I found the team, and I started to give them more projects. And you know, in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, they have been on time and on budget every single time. And I'm like, I mean, what more could you want from your team than that? So so that's essentially how I found them. So I think you can start on Upwork if you're desperate, you know. But honestly, I found a team 2 weeks ago, word of mouth. I checked on Google. The rates were good, and I literally just said, hey, let's, you know, make this landing page for me. You know, it's 200 pounds or whatever. It's low risk. How was it? You know, how were they? And they did a really good job. And we're like, boom, I've got a backup team. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah, very good. Like it. Tom, yeah, wow, sounds like a long way, but yeah, makes sense. Needs a good network. It helps me a lot as I'm a creative director and looking for a team too. And something friends of mine were mentioning yesterday, because they were looking at hiring remotely for the first time, and they're saying, do you reward longevity for people who, you know, in 12 months they're still here, you know, working for you? You know, do you give them incentives to stick around with you? Because like everybody, you could probably find a higher paid gig somewhere in the world, but if you kind of build that trust and they like working with you, you like working for them. So any tips on keeping them around for, like you say, a couple of years like you've done?
Yeah, you know, I think it's important to reward them, and I'm speaking to one of my friends is you know, like a corporate governance attorney, and so he's helping me with some employment stock options and stuff. I don't believe giving, like, you know, like equity in the company, but there's ways to, you know, sort of create you know, like a package, a pool for the employees. So I'm definitely open to that idea. I've hired a operations manager, as I mentioned, and I'm thinking about giving him some equity in at least one of the projects. He's you know, we've only been working a few weeks, but he seems to be on track to be one of the key guys, and I'll definitely be rewarding him, you know, sort of for longevity. I want him to be aligned with me, and we're on the same track for 10 years. So we just, I think, being transparent with your employees to say, hey, you know, like, have a review every quarter and say, how's everything going? And, you know, what can we do to strengthen our relationship together, you know?
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier today as well, which I think is a good one to put to you. You know, everybody's plans, no matter how big or small they were back in January, have clearly changed in some way, shape, or form. How far ahead do you look when you're forecasting and you're looking at growth in your industry, in the SaaS space?
We have a mission statement that has 10 years, 3 years, and 1 year. So, but I mean, realistically, the 3 years just sort of a you know, a loose roadmap. But I like to look at least 3 months ahead. You know, but things change, right? So you may have to sort of divert your path on depending on the economy, or maybe a new opportunity that came up that you didn't know about. You know, so things change. So I'm a big believer in sort of a 90-day objective and breaking that down into sprints. So we've got a 90-day objective, and we do that quarterly. And then we break those down into sprints, you know, sort of Scrum, Agile, software development, but you can do that very well with your management team or operations or sales, whatever. So 90 day, like an example is we want to launch our a SaaS in 90 days. So how do we do that? So first of all, we need to build, and then we got to find 5 customers, and we got to figure out the financing. So everything I do, and I can have 5 of those projects going on at one time. I may not be running them, but I'm discussing them with the employee, who's ever in charge. The CTO has a 90-day goal, and the CFO has one as well. And so we like to give each person in the sort of management team at least 3 rocks that they can get covered in 90 days. So I think 90 days is a good rule of thumb, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same as you. I work on a 90-day target and break that down into like 3 rocks as well. I just think it's a great way. And anything you can chunk down like that for your team as well.
2 weeks is a totally manageable way to you can get something done in 2 weeks. Pretty significant, really, if you focus on it. And people underestimate sort of what they can do in that, and overestimate what they can do in a day.
Yeah, great. And I'll position this one to you as well. Carol, say, what does 3 rocks mean?
Oh, sorry, that's like big objectives. So that would be sort of like, let's say, for example, Tom was mentioning he's trying to start a team. 1 rock might be like find a team lead. So he might plan on that being 90 days to achieve. That would be a rock.
Yeah.
I don't know where that comes from. I can't remember who came up with that, but
no, I can't. But I used to be in the health and fitness space, and that's what they taught me like 10 years ago now, a decade ago now, and it stayed with me just as a really effective method for working. Yeah,
I think they're called rocks is because, as I understand, if you put imagine you have a jar, right, and you put the rocks in. You want to fill the jar with the rocks.
That's right,
as opposed to sand. So you can fill a jar with sand, which is a bunch of tiny little tasks that are sort of meaningless, or you can fill a jar with 3 big rocks. I think that's what the expression sort of came from.
Yeah, and interested to dive into a little bit, and this caught my eye when we first having a bit of communication is the 100 days a year that you're able to ski.
Ah, yes, that's a rock too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's as I mentioned, living in Verbier, about 100 meters from the piste. I can, just on a powder day or whatever, I can walk out and go ski for a morning with my wife, and come back and still make a 12 o'clock podcast if I need to. So yeah, that's that was sort of an objective move. Living in Switzerland was a skier. We're a big ski family. So, being able to, although this year I got cut short, right? The ski season was I'm working about 83 right now. So I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to make it to 100. Doesn't look likely.
Yeah, that's like my holy grail. And we're going to have another attempt at it, because I think it was like 3, maybe 2, maybe it's 3 years ago now. We went to France, and the plan was to move out there to Lake Annecy, and it was like you could be right down by the lake, and I could be paddleboarding in the morning, and in 30 minutes away I could be on my board snowboarding.
Amazing, yeah.
And we'd paid fees for the kids to go into school, and then we went out there, and it was only in hindsight when I kind of broke down my business at the time, and it would have been like leaving the lunatics in charge of the asylum, just like giving them the keys and go. The business was too young, and I just thought, right, okay, we're now looking at our kids are going to be finished in education in like 6 years, and we're like, if we could start the process now, with a second home, and then kind of migrate to that target again as part of like a 5-6 year plan, then that is my holy grail to do 100 days. And I used to, I used to fly to the States every week with when I worked with Virgin Atlantic for 16 and a half years. So I used to ski a lot on the West Coast and the East Coast, more so in Europe. So I just got that taste from it from a really young age, and I'm like, I definitely want to do that. And again, now I can operate, my business from a laptop.
Now it sounds like you can now.
Which I couldn't before.
Yeah.
I couldn't before.
Why though? I don't understand that. Why couldn't you before?
So we were operating like live events all over the UK.
Okay.
And I kind of, when you look back in hindsight and you go, I actually set myself up to not take myself out of the equation because I was the host, and it was like, okay, can't do that. And I was like going from Manchester, right up in the northwest of England, all the way down to Brighton, and it's quite a bit of a journey to be able to do that.
Just been traveling the whole time. Even if you did live in Annecy, you'd have to be coming back and doing all that. So I was looking at Geneva, flying out of there, etc. But now I've once you do that and you have a little look at it and you kind of break things down again and reverse engineer that process, you're like, okay, so it's just the vehicle's different to get to the end goal. So it's definitely achievable, 100%. Carol says, I want to be Geordie. Thank you.
It's a good goal to have for sure. How long have you been out there, by the way? How long have you been living in?
So I've been about 4 years. Yeah, and before it was surfing in Mexico. That was about 6 years.
Okay. So it's all about lifestyle for you.
That's right. It's lifestyle, but also, we're not messing around with the business either, right? We take it seriously, but lifestyle is important. And skiing, I like to be outside, so it's important to live in an area where I can go hiking and running or biking or skiing, surfing, that sort of thing. So
yeah. And I'm interested to know at what point in your life journey, I guess, did you realize that that you were going to be able to achieve and I guess, you've still got goals you want to achieve, but at what point in the journey did you realize that these were like the vehicles that were going to enable you to reach those goals?
So I would say probably the first thing that really helped me was obviously leaving the corporate job and realizing that I could do that. That was a scary time. I completely empathize with anyone that's saying, "Oh, well, it's easy for you," and it wasn't easy. Was not easy for me. I was still in Bermuda. I had a corporate job with the full package, right? And I had 2 babies and a mortgage and everything like that, and leaving that to go start a risky startup was terrifying, and having a mentor to help me through that was a huge step for me, and luckily that mentor has really stayed and guided me through that whole process. He was my mentor for probably about 10 years. And he's still a friend of mine. We just sort of grew apart once that business was once we sold the business. But I would say like anywhere you can get support. But it's a real hustle in the beginning. As I mentioned, that there was one time where I had a full-time job. I had my first business and I had started my second business. So I had 3 jobs, so at that time. And then I was like, obviously I knew like this can't go on. I was like taking calls, for one business here. And then at lunchtime, like doing this and then going back into the job. And so I basically gave him my notice. I sold the other business. So I had a bit of cash and that got me through that first year. That was sort of nerve-wracking.
And I guess this changes again for you, but how far do you think you can take the businesses that you got currently? Do you set a ceiling on that, or? No,
there's no ceiling, and that's the nice thing about it. I mean, with a software as a service, really, if the whole idea again is to have my goal is to have the agency, which is I can hire an operations guy to run that. And hire a sales team. So that's sort of going by itself. And then we sort of dabble in these software as a service products. So maybe the idea is to buy one that's sort of unloved that goes along with our our customer base, and kind of see how that goes. And I kind of see it like almost like being a realtor. How the real estate guys sort of own 15 apartment buildings, but and each key is bringing them in a certain percentage. That's the way I look at these software businesses. So
right.
So, but for me, I understand software. They understand real estate. I can buy a software company for, 5 figures, though, and make that software company would make. I was doing the math, like I own some real estate in Bermuda. Something that I bought a SaaS for, say, $10,000. It makes as much as a property in Bermuda that would be like 700,000, monthly.
No way.
Yeah. So to me, it's just like, it's a no-brainer to be able to pay 10,000 to make the same kind of money. It's not real estate. It's not going to go on for 30 years, but maybe real estate also is capped where this is not. So I can grow it. And maybe it starts at 5,000 a monthly. And then, in 2 years, I could have that, going at 100,000 a month. And if I had, if I had 6 or 7 of those, and I sold one because one started to blow up and it needed more attention, that's sort of the idea.
Nice. And like you say, at the end of the day, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But, there's a very small percentage of people who do it, of course. It's not easy at all. It's all the hard work and the kind of picture of the swan on the lake, but underneath the lake, the legs are going like crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
And for you, what's your, so you said like society, in Switzerland's kind of gone back to, pre-March levels for about a month now. And you're having a break down in France, but you can obviously work while you're doing that. What's your priority for, say, the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, and looking at, September, at least in the UK, I think people looking at, is this the new start? People are going to take holidays. They want to keep the wheels turning, but, all our kids are in theory going back to school full time in September. People will be back at work full time. Offices will be opening. So what's your kind of priority for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks? And how do you view customer behavior come like end of Q3, beginning of Q4, would you say?
Well, I'm definitely optimistic that it'll return. For everyone's situation, we don't want people to be out of work. I don't think the governments can really afford to, sort of carry all this unemployment. So I'm optimistic, but I think you need to plan. I mean, as we see, what's happening in the US right now. I mean, things are going crazy, right? So it looks like a second wave, and they're sort of talking about having children go back to school in September. But I mean, I'm also hearing some people are saying they're having to go back into lockdown. That sounds like an awful sort of scenario where you're like just started your business, you're like, okay, it's over, and then nobody really knows what's going to happen. I don't think. We can be optimistic, but it could go either way, I think. So I personally don't think that Switzerland will go back, but they may do. I don't know. So again, I'm ready to sort of pivot either way. So I'm optimistic, but I also feel like if you're a brick and mortar right now and you're sort of counting on work returning in September, I would strongly advise to have a backup plan, because it may not happen. And if this goes on for another year, a lot of businesses likely wouldn't survive that unless they had a virtual component to their business, or they sort of the yoga studios are having to some of my music teachers and the clients that I have are now having to scramble and figure out ways to make money other than having students come into the house. And So you can do it, and so I think it's important to have a backup plan.
Yeah, I agree with you. And pivot's been one of the more popular words, but we've done it. Festival of Enterprise, I'm hosting on here. They've done it as well. Gone from 2 big live events a year to an online
These
channel.
Lives. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, these lives that and sponsored by the likes of Dell, Microsoft, all the kind of big tech companies as well. So definite mileage in there. And when you were talking about, it's interesting, I just thought, personal level, when you were talking about the music teachers, and my girls have been big into their dancing. So all of a sudden it went from a studio to online. And in the end, we literally stopped it last week because they just said, my girls just said, it's just so difficult to actually, after, about 90 days of this now, the online lessons, something like that's so physical, is really difficult. To actually, they just said the enjoyment had gone from it. It just wasn't working for them. And a number of other friends that I've spoken to said, funnily enough, they've literally just ended it now for the summer in the hope that, come September, they come out the other side. So certain businesses, it is really tough. But like you say, that there is going to be solutions out there. You've just got to think, a little bit differently to everybody else, a little bit outside of the box, etc.
Right. I mean, in any big shift like this there's always opportunity if you're early on that, and get in and be creative. I think it's time to start looking at, well, what are other people doing? How, in other verticals, what are they doing? What's having success? How can that apply to what I'm doing? That sort of thing. So I think it's important to sort of start being creative because, as you say, I mean, they could go back in September, but it may not be. It may not be until next September. We don't know. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tom's come back with a quick question. How do you carry? That's a good question again, Tom. How do you carry out business networking at the moment? Do you do much in your businesses these days?
I do. The networking that I do is not as effective as in-house event, sort of personal meet and greets. But I started a Facebook group, so I go in and I start doing that, and podcasting is great, as you know, Alex. Obviously, you run a course in this, and the podcasting that I do is a great way to meet anyone. It's basically anyone that you want to meet. They're gonna, if you say, "Hey, I run a podcast. I'd love to have you as a guest." I mean, it's like 90% more likely that person will talk to you, right? Rather than like, "Hey, you seem like a really interesting person. I have a question for you." Like, we'll talk to my secretary or whatever.
Yeah. No, you are so right, and that's the advice that I give to most people when they are starting a podcast. And common questions I get asked is that how do I monetize my podcast? And it's just like for me, whatever you offer, it's like if you can actually cut directly to the person you want to ultimately sell something to and have a conversation with them on your podcast, you form a relationship, and it's such a soft sell. They suddenly know exactly about you and your business, and you don't actually have to offer them anything because you're asking them what challenges they got and what problems they have in life.
That's right.
And you're presenting the solution. So Tom, I think however, I think we got 3 choices. We've got a video, the written word, or audio. So whether you choose a vlog, a blog, or a podcast to document your business journey, Tom, for example, as a solo business owner, whatever business you're in, I think it's a great way to do it. And again, like Geordie said, it's online as well. We do live podcast events as well. Obviously not doing them at the moment, but it's such an easy one to fall back on then, to just go 100% online. And tech during lockdown has been such a great leveler. Everyone's using the same stuff. Everybody's using, Zoom or an equivalent. Even when watching TV programs on terrestrial TV here, they're all broadcasting from their bedrooms, using earphones and relatively inexpensive entry-level mics, etc. So
It's interesting, you know, a lot of people say, how can I monetize a podcast? It's like, why, when you're starting a podcast, why are you thinking about that before
It's
you've
the
even
wrong question,
started
isn't
it,
it?
you know? Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about the sponsorship and how you're going to monetize it. If it's interesting to you, you should just do it. And that's what I did when I
Mm.
started my podcast. Is I just wanted to, it's a networking thing. I wanted to talk to interesting people like yourself, or, you know,
Mm.
the guy that started My Protein. You know, you obviously had an interest in how he made his, you know, 60 million pounds, and you know, you wanted to talk to him and find out his journey. It's a great way to meet people, you know, and you know, people are much more likely to come on as a guest on a podcast. And I have no sponsors. I'm the sponsor, you know. So
Yeah.
as you say, you know, um, people get to know you through the podcast, so it's much easier to send a prospect to you know, a show. Is like, actually, I just talked about this in a show that we did. Why don't you listen to that? It might
Mm.
help you out, you know. And they learn about you. They see, well, I don't like this guy's style, or, you know, or you know, he actually sounds like a nice guy, you know. It sounds like
Mm.
pretty easy to get along with, and they're going to be much more likely to come and buy from you later
Yeah.
from doing that show. You know, it
Mm.
creates that sort of it creates a level of personal level that you can kind of get closer to the customer. So it's a great question, Tom. Um, I think Facebook group, Facebook community is a good way, and podcasting. A brilliant idea that this guy that I know, he started a pubcast. So like literally on
Love
LinkedIn,
it.
you know, he's out of London or something. He says every Friday he posts on LinkedIn, and he builds it up and say, on Friday night we're having a pubcast, you know, because no one can go to the pubs, right? So they
Yeah.
get
Love
on
it.
Zoom, and he shows a picture, and there's 15 little squares, and each one's talking about what, you know, he's got a single malt scotch or whatever, and the other one's drinking a Guinness, and they just sort of network, and it's all on this thing. And he started this pubcast. It's great. And
It's got the
you know,
name, the best name in the world,
yeah,
the
that's right.
podcast.
That's
Jeez, I
right.
love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I started up at the start of lockdown as well. I started up a Facebook group, which is, you know, going great guns as well. You know, I think
yeah,
we've had 25 people at the last count have launched a podcast during the last 7-8 weeks from scratch, you know, who just
yeah,
said it was just that nudge they needed.
yeah,
You know, me
exactly.
doing some free lives to get them going. And it is a great way to get to know people, to position yourself, as Geordie said, as an
Yeah,
authority in your space. Great positioning tool, and it's fun. That's the
yeah.
biggest thing.
Well,
You
I
know, when
want
you
to see
do
more pubcasts too. I'll join the pubcast
it.
anytime, right? Friday night
Me too.
pubcast.
Me too. And how long have you been podcasting for, Geordie?
Not that long, really. So about sort of maybe 8 months or something, 6, 7 months. I've got
Mm.
podcasts all the way till October now. So now it's great. I can just relax. And it was
That's the
going, you
best
know, I was
place.
doing
Yeah.
like four a week. But that
Mm.
was during COVID, and I knew I was going to be taking off in the summer. So now I've got like 4 months where I don't have to do one. Um,
Yeah.
and then if I want to, if I meet someone really interesting, now I can do, hey, let's do a podcast like next week. I can do it, and
Mm.
then I can just do one a week or whatever. It's really not that hard.
No, it really isn't. And I think that, you know, the barriers for people are that they think it's really technical, that it is really
Yeah,
difficult, but it isn't. And I'm the same as you. If you can get in a sweet spot where you've got, again, like 90 days worth of content
yeah,
already recorded, and you've just got your team, you know, I've just got my team editing, producing them, posting them up, etc. Then it does enable you to relax,
yeah.
rather than
That's
being in the
great.
hamster wheel of every week going, I need to launch another episode. I need to launch
Yeah.
another
Oh,
episode.
you don't want to be in that. You want to have, you know, that's why we launched with like sort of, you know, like a month
Yeah.
backup. So we took like maybe 8 weeks to launch, and so I did like 10 shows in that 8 weeks, which isn't that hard. That's sort of one a week. But you can even load it up more, so that by the time we launched, I could stop podcasting. Something happened for 2 months and I would still have shows, so
Yeah.
it's good if you just think of it that way. It's a good way to do it.
Who have you putting you on the spot now? Who's towards the top of your must have on your podcast list?
Well, Richard Branson's up there, definitely. If you've got an in there, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
Do you know what? I had a friend of mine, and I didn't push it. In hindsight, probably didn't push it enough. But he was the DJ on Necker Island. Only 24 years old. Living the dream.
Yeah.
On Necker Island, and he's in Richard's latest book. There's a picture of them in the wine cellar when the hurricane hit and blew the whole house down. There's a picture of him and Richard, hunkering down in the bunker there. And what he did do for me, and he's posting up pictures every week, going, here's me and Tom Brady, here's me.
Yeah, all the guys that are coming down there. Yep.
But I got him to record. I had Ted Baker founder Ray Kelvin for a live event actually, and Ben, my friend, managed to get a live WhatsApp video with Richard actually asking the first question for the event, and we beamed it up on the big screen. So that he actually asked the question for that live event. But yeah, in hindsight, I wished I pushed a bit further to get him on the show, because he since met his girlfriend, had a baby together, moved off from the island and moved back home. So it's like, okay, he's still got a connection, but yeah, he's definitely towards the top of my list. And hey, it's going to be a good story, the comeback, isn't it? How did he come back from?
I'm interested. He will, right? He will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Good answer. And just to finish up, then we're coming up to the hour, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Nice to have a bit of networking going on there between a couple of you. That's always good. What would you like people to take from your story? Because there's clearly a whole bunch of different lessons people can take, and there's a lot of inspiration. I take personally from your story, let alone those who are watching as well. So interested to know from your point of view, what would you like people to take away?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that you need to have some type of a skill or product that you start off with, and from there it starts. It starts with your core sort of focus and passion on that. Either it's a skill, if you're if, as Tom was mentioning, being a creative director, you start with that creative and then build a team, small, trial process, and move to really sort of automate that, and step away from the business and kind of grow it, and really think of it as from an owner mentality where you're not just a freelancer. I think it's really important to not stay as a freelancer, because then you're just sort of, you're really just no better off than, working. You're probably less better off than working at a corporate job. So you want to really start thinking as an owner and building a team, and not thinking about micromanaging, empowering people, and stepping away from the business. I think that's a huge for an entrepreneur's journey. Sort of that freelancer to, as I call it, the freelancer agency to product sort of path that I'm trying to take.
Yeah, no, I like it, and appreciate you taking the time out. You've got most of the day still ahead to enjoy. So thank you for taking the time out, and
my pleasure.
We'd love to maybe get a day skiing in Verbier this winter.
Yeah, if you're here, hey, we just networked, right? So Alex, anytime we're come on over, and I'd love to meet up sometime.
Yeah, love to. And, we're putting this out on the Screw It Just Do It podcast as well. Great story. Yeah. Can I ask, actually, what are you using anything for the audio? This is literally like the best audio I've heard in 100 days. We've been doing these live webinars.
Apple right here, stock.
Snap. Snap.
Right here. That's another thing, is people overthink the audio, right?
Don't they?
No, I think, what I think it is, is these local, this service here, Crowdcast, I think is really good. It's that local, goes up to the local on your side and local on my side. I just switched to that on riverside.fm. It's the same sort of service, but I've been really happy with that. And Zoom was terrible. So I think it's the service, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a far better quality than Zoom. Unfortunately,
I think it's just a bit of a buffer, right? So you're like, it's as you speak there. It just seems to be that service, because Zoom was terrible, and it maybe because everyone is trying to use the service, and it just was getting overused. But it was just, I didn't get great sounding audio at all.
No, our episode today, unfortunately, with Oliver Cookson, which is a great episode, and it's just, me being me and being in the audio space, listening back to it, and it literally sounds like
it didn't sound that good, eh?
Into a submarine and goes, 3,000 meters.
I know, that's unfortunate. I think people overlook that now, though. If the content is good, I think they don't, it doesn't have to be that good. I mean, it has to be bearable, but
Agree. Well, listen, enjoy the rest of your time down there in the Southwest, and definitely keep in touch, and I will let you know when we'll put this out later this summer on the podcast as well.
Great. I look forward to it. Thanks so much for all the listeners as well. Great questions from all you guys.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. Also, we've been streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, so I haven't seen the questions on there, but I know we've got a couple of hundred people on in total, which is awesome. So thank you, those of you who, Paola, Tom, and Carol especially, who've jumped in and engaged with us today. It's made it really, really fun. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your week.
Yep, thanks.
Bye-bye now.